Load the box is back, and Kirk Cousins is not. The Vikings have moved on from Kirk Cousins officially today. He signed a 4-year, $180 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons. Only about $100 million of it is guaranteed. $90 million is fully guaranteed for the first 2 seasons. It's a big deal. I'm just going to start right off the cuff, Jordan. How do you feel about it? What was your sort of initial reaction when the news broke earlier this afternoon, and where are you at now?
So as I was telling my boss, who doesn't care about football, much less the Minnesota Vikings, it's odd to me because it feels like I've been doing this song and dance of, and it's not always on screen or on, a live microphone. Sometimes it's, just to my buddies or us discussing, in between shows. I've been doing this song and dance of, this has to be the year that they move off of him, right? And I'm not one of these, like, if you watch the show, I don't think I am pounding the table, Kirk Cousins is terrible and we have to get rid of him and he's the reason the Vikings can't get over the hump. And I'm not one of these guys. It just kind of has felt like, okay, it seems like he's making a lot of money and the team's not necessarily from a roster standpoint where it needs to be. So it seems like now's a good cutoff point. And then they would extend him. And then I was like, okay, well, it looks like 2 years from now, that will be the cutoff point. And then we extended him. And so this year, coming off the ACL, the Achilles, it seemed like this was the cutoff point again. And so it's almost like disbelief for me that he has went to Atlanta and agreed to, like 4 years, $100 million guaranteed. I think it's $140 million total. The contract surprised me, that he got with Atlanta, just the length of it. I mean, he's going to be their quarterback until he's 40 years old, which means he'll probably end his career in Atlanta if I had to guess. But yeah, I think it's kind of like shock, but it's not like bad shock. I was shocked when he tore his Achilles in Green Bay, and that was bad shock. That was where do we go from here shock. This is optimism shock. This is, okay, the team has decided to go in a different direction. They didn't want to give him, I'm assuming some reports are coming out, it was that third year, he wanted guaranteed money into the third year of the contract. And Atlanta threw $10 million guaranteed into that third year. The Vikings probably weren't willing to do that. I'm sure it'll come out in the next few days or weeks what the Vikings' final offer was that they had on the table. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm in a good place. I'm not. There are some shows that are dancing on the Cousins grave or the Cousins plane as it flies over to Atlanta or whatever, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'll miss Kirk. I think this will be kind of a tribute show to Kirk almost because he's given us a lot of really fun moments. And this is the first show we've ever done without Kirk Cousins being a member of the Vikings, although technically he's a member of the Vikings until Wednesday at noon, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm in a healthy, optimistic zone right now. Are you in a state of mourning? I know, like, you're a little bit, like, sweeter on Cousins than I am. Where are you at? How are you doing? Do you need tissues?
We're not quite at the tissue stage. Okay. I don't think we'll necessarily get to the tissue stage. It was interesting. If you go back and listen to the last 4 or 5 shows that we've done ever since Viking season ended, and we really got into this to Kirk or not to Kirk discussion, and I had sort of talked myself into being ready to move on. I think if you would have asked me on January 10th, are you ready to move on? I would have said no. I think we need to bring him back. I think this team was ready to compete for a Super Bowl, all that. And while I do still think that the Vikings team of 2023 could have made a Super Bowl run had Kirk Cousins not torn his Achilles tendon, the 2024 team, as it stands today, does not appear to be ready to make said Super Bowl run if they were paying Kirk Cousins $45 million.
That's a lot of money.
It's just the way in which and that's 45 plus the 28 in the dead money. So a lot of money, 73 million that would have been. And as we'll get into later in the show here, the Vikings making some moves to shore up the defense, some really good moves. I think most Vikings fans can agree on, at least, on paper at this point. Some of those moves probably don't happen as readily if you sign Kirk Cousins, just because of the financial constraints that big of a contract puts on you. And this is not me saying you can never pay a quarterback who is not Patrick Mahomes. Of course not. But the cap situation that the Vikings are in today, as a ramification of what Rick Spielman did to the salary cap, and how Kwesi is sort of trying to amend that now, there's just only so much that you can do to pay a quarterback top money at this moment. And $45 million, I believe, probably got to a point where Kwesi had a line in the sand and he wasn't willing to jump over it. And so I think my objective mind is good with it. Now, who's replacing him? That's the whole nother discussion. But my sentimental mind and my, emotional mind, as I read the tweets, I was pretty disappointed. I think like I said, I had gotten myself to the place of, okay, I'm okay with this. I'm okay if it moves on. But then I think just seeing Kirk Cousins as a Falcon in 900 straight tweets, it just got to me at a certain point, and I didn't like how those few words sat next to each other. So I wish him the best. We're not going to talk about Kirk Cousins a whole lot more on this show. Probably we'll talk about him when he comes to US Bank Stadium this season, and probably plays a primetime game against the Vikings and has a packed stadium. Those ticket prices are going to be high, folks. And we'll talk about him that week and the week prior and maybe the week after, and that might be it. But like you said, Jordan, I mean, for the last 6 years, the results from the team have been underwhelming. I think we can all agree on that. One playoff win, 3 playoff games in 6 years is not enough for a franchise that's trying to win Super Bowls. You can't pin that all on one player, even if it is the quarterback. But obviously, his inclusion in the roster did not bring them to the heights that they thought it could.
Yeah.
In that vein, though, do you have a favorite Kirk Cousins moment or a favorite game or moment that you look back on fondly as we close the Kirk chapter?
A little bit of recency bias, and some fans will be mad that this is one of my favorite moments, but that game against San Francisco was fun. Maybe it's because it was I think it was the first game I watched in my own house with my daughter, in a Vikings onesie, with my wife, and my wife made a big, fish and macaroni and cheese dinner, and that's fancy eating for us Ohio folk. And so we sat and we ate dinner, and we watched the Vikings, and I think one of my favorite shows, the finale of it, came out that day. So that was just a good Monday for me. I watched the finale of one of my favorite shows. I watched the Vikings have this, in a game that I expected them to get massacred. I watched them hang with one of the best teams in the conference and in the entire NFL. I mean, they were a possession away from winning a Super Bowl this season. And Kirk starts off ugly with a ball that should have been caught by Addison that got taken away from him, turned into a pick, and then ends the half with that, that should have been interception that Addison whipped away from the defender and took it to the house. I mean, it was such a fun game. Other than that, I think the playoff win against the Saints, anytime we beat the Saints in the playoffs, it's kind of sweet, and I'll never forget that game, watching it, with my family, my brother and my dad, no wives, no children in the picture yet. And so watching it with them, and also one of my close friends, Chris, who used to host Load the Box Browns, he was there to watch it with us, and watching that bomb to Thielen and hearing that, who was the defensive back for the Saints that punched his teammate? Do you remember his name?
Marcus Lattimore?
Yes, Marcus Lattimore, punched...
Or Marshawn Lattimore, sorry.
Yes, yeah. Marshawn Lattimore punching his teammate and getting so frustrated that, he was just getting cooked by Adam Thielen. And then Kyle Rudolph, hand fighting in the end zone, and then getting on Twitter and seeing all the Saints fans crying about push offs, and it's cry me a river, Saints fans. Yeah, look, whether the playoff success wasn't there. Kirk Cousins, there were a lot of good memories. He had a certain oddity factor, geeky factor, dad factor, whatever you want to call it, that he really started to lean into these last couple of years. And I wish we would have gotten that for the entire 6 years rather than just these last two with Kevin O'Connell. And because these last 2 years have been the most fun, being it's like a rejuvenation for being a Vikings fan, in my opinion. It's just fun to be a fan of the team. It's Delky, it's Cole's cash and chains on guys that shouldn't be wearing chains. And what was your favorite? I know I've went through like a laundry list there, but favorite Kirk Cousins memory for you?
Yeah, you covered a lot there.
I'm
and I
sorry.
think no, you're good. I've still got plenty. I think the thing you mentioned just with the last 2 years, I think just needs to be restated. Like whether it was Kirk or just the vibe of the team. Mike Zimmer was obviously a good coach and still is a good coach. I would imagine he'll do well in Dallas as their defensive coordinator. But the vibe of the team obviously has taken an uptick in the last 2 years with the new leadership, and it's very clear that Kirk Cousins sort of blossomed in his personality with this new vibe within the building, and Kevin O'Connell being a good friend, frankly, and so that was just really cool to see. And you could point to a lot of moments on the field. I mean, a lot of the good Kirk moments that I'll look back fondly on are the plane ride home from London with the chains, and when the chains first were born, and
the look on his face was priceless when Darrisaw spun it. That was like, and Cousins' face was so taken aback that he was wearing a spinning chain. Like, I'll never forget that. That was golden.
Yeah, it was that, and then obviously the whole chains thing took on new life, and I think it was after the Washington game. He was shirtless on the plane, and it got a little bit rambunctious and ridiculous after that. But it was a fun vibe to follow from a fan perspective, because I'm seeing this with the Minnesota Timberwolves right now as well, with they're a vibe of a team. They really like each other, and you can tell when you watch them play, and when you follow the team, it's a lot more enjoyable because it's not, a group of guys that hate each other and can't wait to get away from each other. And that's just the vibe that the Vikings have had. And even this last 7-10 year was a enjoyable season to follow, because you could tell that the camaraderie of the group was real. So, but on top of the other things that you mentioned, I think that game in Buffalo was obviously, it was chaotic in the first half. There were the two picks. The one that was, he thought he was throwing to Jefferson, he threw it right to a defensive back, and some of those things in the first half where you're like, oh gosh, how bad is this going to end up? And obviously that game had many moments of luck or just football gods pushing the ball in the Vikings' direction. He got some help from Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson's insane catch. But there were also, I think, the things that I remember from that game almost more than anything. Of course, the Jefferson catch is the first thing that comes to mind, but the other things were just the absolute lasers that Kirk Cousins was throwing in the third and fourth quarter and overtime under duress, finding Jefferson between two or three defenders to set up that first and goal in overtime. And that was some of the most top tier quarterbacking he had done for the Vikings. And it was a fun game to watch. I also remember it fondly because it was the first game I watched with my second child, Jude. He was 1 at the time, and he was just sleeping on my lap for most of that game. So I'm trying to get excited and, hold my breath when Eric Kendricks falls on the ball in the end zone, and getting up, pacing around the room, holding my baby.
It's so funny to me to think of you, one child, already in the world, holding the second child, trying to, let him enjoy a nap while this crazy game's going on. I think during that game, after the Jefferson catch, I'll never forget, I fell down on my parents' floor. My parents have 2 dogs that shed pretty bad. So there was dog hair on the ground. I started doing like snow angels, and I went, I think I started cussing, and my dad yelled at me, but I was like, Justin Jefferson's the best wide receiver in the league. Like, that was the moment where I was like, yeah, is there even debate about it anymore? Like, that was the catch of the decade, man. Like, how did he come down with that? And so the parallels there of like, I mean, granted, look, I had a baby a year later, so it's not like I was that far behind you, but like the parallels of you like doing the dad thing and then me just like a drunken college kid doing snow angels on hardwood and dog hair, cussing up a storm because Jefferson made a catch is really funny. You know what's going to take a long time, and I don't know if this is all Vikings fans, I'm curious on your opinion. Look, let's go back to like the last game of the season against Detroit. Like, Nick Mullins has the ball, chance to go down. I don't remember if it was to tie or take the lead in regulation. Cox one up and lets it rip deep. And there was like this part of me, I forgot that when quarterbacks do that, they can throw interceptions. Because it felt like when Kirk Cousins went deep, it was usually a home run. Like, if he decided to let it rip, it was going to be a good thing. Unless the receiver, like, ran the wrong route or stopped running the route like Jalen Rago. It felt like he hit on those deep throws more than he missed. And so to see, like, Josh Dobbs, overthrowing balls that go out of bounds that would have been touchdowns, or Nick Mullins throwing balls behind receivers that should have been touchdowns, that's going to take a while to, like, adapt to. Now, granted, look, we might draft a quarterback who comes in and hits those throws, and we'll all be spoiled by having good quarterback play, whatever. But is that just me? Did I get too comfortable with Cousins where I was like, anytime I see a quarterback go to cock one, let one rip deep, I'm just like, oh, this is a touchdown play. Like, this is probably a touchdown that's about to be thrown.
I think that you're hitting on something that's very true, and I think that's very underrated about his game. Is he is a excellent deep ball thrower. And I mean, I remember one vividly, actually a couple of them. Bootlegs to the left, setting his feet and hitting Diggs in stride in that 2019 season, I believe. One against Philadelphia, one against Denver in that ridiculous comeback. And that sort of precision on deep balls kind of was always in his bag. And I think because of the dad vibes and because of the check down Charlie thing that he got tagged with at some point in his career, and it kind of followed him, he never really had gotten, and probably still hasn't gotten, the level of, appreciation for his ability to throw a deep ball. So I think you're right on that. I think it is interesting because I feel like when I'm watching the Vikings, especially when Cousins would throw a deep ball, I'd have the same sort of thought, especially because oh, well, 18's down there, so probably catch it. And then on the flip side, it was interesting because, if you're a fan and your defense is getting thrown deep on, you might feel nervous, but I didn't really have that level of like nervousness when the Vikings defense would get thrown deep on. So in some ways, it's kind of proof in telling I trusted Kirk Cousins' ability to throw a deep ball more than almost any other quarterback in the league. And so I think you're right about that. I think it's something that's going to be underrated, and we might find out a very real hard truth week 1, depending on if it's, God forbid, Sam Darnold or somebody else playing quarterback for the Vikings. We could be in for a long year.
Yeah.
Do you want to pivot to that at all? I mean, there isn't really a whole lot to speak of at this point in the whole next quarterback discussion for the Vikings, but any thoughts on, rumors you've seen or any musings you've had on who might be next?
Yeah, so I really thought it was going to be Russell Wilson. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought he made too much sense. Just how cheap you could get him. It was kind of it felt destined, like with how many times he, broke Vikings fans' hearts, that he would now come and I guess I shouldn't say break their hearts. He beat us in the regular season a lot, but it wasn't like we didn't see him in the playoffs that much. But it just kind of felt right that he would come here. But he's obviously in Pittsburgh, so yeah. I mean, look, I'm all about potentially bringing in a Sam Darnold or like a Zach Wilson. But I don't know that I don't know that if Nick Mullins is under contract, and I don't think that Nick Mullins is like worse than those guys. I don't. I've seen Zach Wilson play in the NFL, and unfortunately, I loved the guy out of BYU. He's also kind of turnover prone. He holds onto the ball. He sees ghosts. He feels like a ruined product. Sam Darnold, same thing. He's where seeing ghosts comes from, right? Like he famously said it, and then some idiot in the mic'd up department released it and put that into the world. So I think we just let it ride with Nick Mullins, but we have to go get the QB of the future. I think that's apparent now, and the Vikings have a new trade partner potentially in the Atlanta Falcons, who now have their quarterback for the next 2 years minimum, maybe 3, maybe 4. So, the Falcons might be willing to, let their top 10 pick go if the Vikings want to move up and get like J.J. McCarthy. But I really think Kwesi right now is walking the phones, calling New England and calling Washington, and hey, let's make a deal. And I think you can see that in some of these bigger name free agent signings that they're doing along the defensive side of the ball, which we will get to. I promise that we're going to talk about things other than quarterbacks. But when your QB of 6 years, probably like a top 3 QB in your franchise history, leaves the team, you spend an appropriate amount of time discussing the QB that is leaving the team and who's his replacement's going to be. I'm really starting to get the vibe, and this is just a gut feeling. I don't have people in the building telling me this. I think the Vikings are kind of starting to go all in on J.J. McCarthy. And I think that I like J.J. McCarthy. I mean, look, there's things that I don't like about him. There are things that I love about him. He's like 21 years old, so he has a lot of time to improve and grow. And so if it is J.J. McCarthy, it wouldn't shock me if they did bring in a Sam Darnold, who maybe they think Sam Darnold gives you a better chance of competing and going 7-9, or maybe sneaking into the playoffs if the defense can play at the level that it played at in stretches last year. They're going to have to go get a running back, but if you can maybe lean on your run game a little bit, let J.J. McCarthy sit, and then 2025 becomes kind of the, all right, here we go. J.J. McCarthy, this is your team. You've had a year in the system. You should understand it. Let's see if you can go out there and actually make all of the throws and decisions that you need to make. I would still rather see them, and it takes 2 to tango, so I'm not saying this is like, it's as easy as just snapping your fingers and getting it done. I would sell the farm to go up to 3 and get Jaden Daniels. I really would. It just, I honestly think I like Jaden Daniels more than Caleb Williams, and especially with like him denying medicals at the combine, which I don't think there's anything like going on there. But he just kind of like, I hate when guys seem like they buy their own hype like a little bit too much. Like, it's one thing to have confidence. It's another thing to like, yeah, well, not every team needs to see my medicals because, I'm going to go number 1. So only like the teams that might be picking at 1 need to see it. And it's like, come on, but like, what do you have tiny biceps? Like, are you afraid to get, what's the hold up here? But Jaden Daniels to me throws a beautiful ball. I think he's accurate. I think he's, he has stories out there about how he trains in virtual reality, and he sets the like defense to like 6 times speed or 2 times speed or whatever it is. So that way, when he plays on the field, it actually slows down for him. So like he practices sped ups. That way the game is slower for him on the field. And he just has that mobile I think he is kind of the best parts of, a Josh Dobbs and the best parts of a Kirk Cousins, and you roll them into one and you get yourself a Jaden Daniels. Now granted, he could suck. I'm not batting 1,000 over here. I like my guys that I like, and I dislike the ones that I dislike, and Jaden Daniels just happens to fall in the FOMO category. But yeah, I mean, do you think they're gonna make do you think they're gonna make a splash move in the draft, move up, get their guy, or do you think they'll maybe sit, let things marinate, maybe take like not a flyer, but maybe take someone like Michael Penix late in the first, maybe in the second?
I think this is the year that you got to go for it. I think if you're at the place where you no longer have a franchise quarterback and there really is no plan, and you have one of the best quarterback drafts presumably in a while, you have to go for it. I think the issue that I see, and you're mentioning Atlanta, they have the eighth overall pick, so that's not going to get you Daniels, May, or Williams most likely, unless one of them bombs an interview or something and whatever. But it could very well get you McCarthy. Um, I think there has to be a level of urgency to this draft. I've been on this show many times talking about how I believe the draft is a crapshoot, and there's just, I mean, you look at the 2021 draft, 4 of those top 5 quarterbacks have been faceplants so far. Mac Jones no longer plays for the Patriots. Trey Lance no longer plays for the 49ers. Zach Wilson is probably on his way out of New York. And Trevor Lawrence is the only one that's worked, and Justin Fields is probably gone from Chicago. I mean, 4 of the first 5 quarterbacks in that, QB-rich draft have been bad. And so you look at this draft, it could end up being the same. But you have to swing, and it might be the year to swing. And if you miss, you miss, and you try again the next year. But going for sort of a second round, take a flyer, injury, old guy, I'm not there. If you're at this place, you have to be able and willing to go for it. So I think whether or not they can pull it off is another question. And I think we've talked about that plenty, so we don't need to get into a ton here. But in my mind, Chicago, Washington, and New England, they all need quarterbacks. And even if you could talk yourself out of Chicago needing a quarterback, they're not trading you the number 1 overall pick. And so you are looking at a situation, if you're the Vikings, where you have to sweeten the pot substantially to convince the Commanders or the Patriots that you have a package that is desirable enough to them to forego selecting potentially their own franchise quarterback. And I think that's got to be tough to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard all these people throwing out things like the Patriots might not need a quarterback, and it's like, well, who's going to play their quarterback position this year otherwise? Bailey Zappi? That's what they got. So it's either that or they bring in a bridge guy for what, so it's going to be steep. I would be shocked if Justin Jefferson was included in that. I don't think trading him makes a whole lot of sense if you're going to get a rookie quarterback. We've talked about that idea, how you kind of want to have the best receiver in football for the rookie to throw to.
Yep.
But regardless, it would be a steep asking price.
Yeah, I want to really quickly. I want to pivot off the quarterback because the Vikings did make some other acquisitions today on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
I want to really quickly, because this is a take I've seen, and if you're still with us, and you could be screaming at your phone or your whatever you're listening to us, through, you could be screaming saying, we're dummies and we're idiots and we don't know what we're talking about. I'm going to say this, and this is kind of a hot take, I think. I do think that this decision by the Vikings took a lot of huevos, cojones, or whatever you want to call it. Like, this was you could have matched the offer, kept Kirk Cousins, and for a fact you are going to be a 7-win team minimum with Kirk Cousins. Maybe you will win more with Kirk Cousins if you hit in the draft and if you bring in players the cheap way. And this is a decision like you pointed out earlier. Kwesi had a line in the sand and he said, I'm not crossing it, and he stuck to his guns and he said, I'm going to basically live and die by the quarterback that is selected in about a month and a half. So that takes some guts to do. It's kind of the devil versus the devil you don't. Oh, the grass is always greener. So the new quarterback's always going to be better than what Cousins was. And look, there's a chance we end up with Christian Pondo. There's a chance we end up with Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, one of these elite level quarterbacks. And if we do happen to get one of those, the NFC is kind of lacking in elite level quarterback play at the moment. It's like maybe Jalen Hurts. I would say Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy's pretty down good, but I don't think he's like that upper echelon level. And so if you are able to find somebody like a Jaden Daniels, a Drake May, a JJ McCarthy, and they hit big, I mean, you're talking about 15 years of just penciling yourself in as in the playoffs because you have a really elite level quarterback. But it is a team spout, and so there's a defense that the Vikings have to address as well. I'm going to get this out of the way quickly because I'm seeing a lot of people saying like, oh, the Vikings are spending big in free agency and they're really stacking up on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think they are stacking up on the defensive side of the ball. If you look at the moves that were made today, they signed a 26-year-old pass rusher in Jonathan Guinard. Grenard, thank you. Coming out of Houston, he had 12.5 sacks last season. Pretty solid player. You know, he's on a second contract. He's the Danielle Hunter replacement because I don't think Hunter's coming back. And then they signed Van Ginkel, who is a pass rushing linebacker who would be like the DJ Wanham replacement. And he's pretty solid, but I don't know that he's this massive, elite upside pass rusher. And then they signed Blake Cashman, who feels like either a depth piece or he's going to be Ivan Pace Jr.'s running mate to replace Jordan Hicks. So it just feels like they're just replacing the guys that are walking out the door, and they're bringing, they're keeping their defense at about the level it is. Free agency or legal tampering just opened today at noon, so I'm not saying the Vikings are done. They could go out and get a L'Jarius Sneed. They could go out and, get somebody. I didn't see a true upgrade made to the defense today in free agency, and I obviously just covered all three of those guys. If you have one that you want to single out, feel free to, but I was really hoping to see a true upgrade, like a Christian Wilkins being brought in, somebody like that, and that obviously didn't happen. I've been pounding the table saying Wilkins all offseason. He's now a Las Vegas Raider. Do you view any of these guys as upgrades over the guys that they're taking the positions for? Do you think maybe Wanham still comes back? Do you think Hicks maybe still comes back and plays like a depth role? What do you see out of the free agent signings on the defensive side?
Yeah, there's a lot here. Really quickly, just a couple things to note as you were talking. Just wanted to mention a couple things. The Christian Wilkins thing would have been awesome. Fantastic defensive tackle from the Dolphins. Obviously, the Brian Flores connection. But 4 years, $110 million. Yeah, no. You're not matching that money. So he was off the table. Was it 4 years or 3? Did I get that wrong?
It was foul. No, it was foul.
It was 4. Okay. And then just a couple other things too. Jordan Hicks signed with the Browns about an hour ago.
I did not see that.
Yep. So just saw that from Schefter. 2 years, $8 million contract. So
good for him.
He's gonna go hang out with Dalvin Tomlinson and not Zadarius Smith as of now, but maybe he'll be.
I thought they re-signed Zadarius.
Maybe they did.
This is Load the Box Bombs.
I did not see that.
I'm tired of Kevin Stefanski poaching all of our talent.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. They're becoming Vikings East. Yeah. The Browns are re-signing Zadarius Smith.
Yeah.
Per Diana Rossini. Okay. Anyway, so Jordan Hicks to the Browns. One other thing that I want to note here, and this is courtesy of Will Reggett's Vikings Sports Illustrated reporter. The Vikings are interested in Aaron Jones. The Vikings obviously are in need of a running back. Alexander Mattison was released earlier this week. We didn't have a show last week, so we didn't really get a chance to talk about that. Mattison had sort of an up and down career with the Vikings. He was pegged to be the starter this year. I think we can all agree he underwhelmed in his performance overall. I think he was a community favorite, fan favorite. I personally really liked him as a guy to cover, and was always a good quote. Really solid dude as well. He's gone, and so now there's obviously a need to fill in the running back position. Aaron Jones was released by the Packers earlier today, as they signed Josh Jacobs. Many know him, Thumper from the Raiders. He's going to be a load to tackle for the next few years. So anyway, just wanted to throw some of those tidbits out. You asked about the defensive signings. I wouldn't say there's any of them that are, moves that will, be Quasi's shining moment or anything like that. Nor, to your point, do I think any of these moves are super lucrative and oh my gosh, they overpaid and all this. Van Ginkel 10 million or 20 million for 2 years, Cashman 22 million for 3 years, Bernard 76 million for 4 years. Obviously, he's the big winner with the money there, but none of that is huge money. I mean, you're going to be paying the two pass rushers, Bernard and Van Ginkel, less money collectively than you would be paying for Danielle Hunter per year. So you got two pass rushers versus one with Danielle Hunter, and I think first blush I would say maybe an upgrade from Van Ginkel to or from Wanham to Van Ginkel. I don't think anybody in their right mind would say that Grenard is better than Hunter. The thing that you could look at with Grenard is he's younger. He's only 26. He's got potentially more runway on his legs. He had a really good season with D'Amico Ryans this year. So there's definitely some potential there, but I don't think there's anything here that is, oh my gosh, the Vikings are breaking the bank and they're going to build the 2023 version of the Seattle Seahawks dynasty defense. So I think they were smart moves, though. The Vikings needed to shore these positions up. We've talked about it all off season. Obvious positions of need, and if you do this now in free agency, that gives you more leeway potentially to use some of that draft capital to trade up and get a quarterback. So there's many different ways to build a team. And it's clear that shoring up the defense with some veteran help was important for a group that could potentially be lacking some as they lose a bunch of veterans like you were talking about. So important moves. None of them are earth-shattering, but solid moves for sure.
I wanna quickly touch on Grenard, who did I say it right that time?
I think so.
Okay, all right. I wanted to make sure this is why I love this time of year, because I get to mispronounce names and then get corrected, and then it'll come out, in 3 months that he actually goes by Guineard, and like there's like an I in there that isn't actually in there, and we'll figure it out as a fan base. But I watched all 12 and a half of his sacks from last season, and like none of them were the Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, just absolutely eat the tackle for lunch and then get to the quarterback. They were all kind of like, stay disciplined, let the quarterback kind of, run to you. And look, I think there's a case to be made that do you need to have like a dominant edge rusher in today's NFL? Or is it better to have like two B- edge rushers or B edge rushers? I would say that's fine to have the two B edge rushers, but I would like to have an A+ defensive tackle or just interior defensive lineman. I don't know what position in Flores' defense it would technically be an end, but it's whatever. Who cares? So we need a big fat guy to be in the middle of the field that can do a lot of stuff. And I cannot. I told my boss, I said, if the Vikings sign this Christian Wilkins guy, like before I leave work, there's a chance I drive to the gas station and buy like cheap champagne or cheap any alcohol, and I come back and I just start spraying it because I would be so excited and so giddy. And I was really disappointed that we didn't go get him, because it did feel like this was an opportunity where a premier interior pass rusher was on the interior D lineman was on the market. And I like that you felt of the draft as a crapshoot, because it really is. It's there's a lot of misses in the draft and there's very few like hits, and it felt like this was a chance to get a hit. And like you said, the offer was steep, and Vegas obviously paid out the hind end for him. So, man, I really wanted Christian Wilkins. I'm not gonna get over that one. But you live and you learn, and who knows, maybe the Vikings will trade all their draft picks, move up, get a quarterback, and then we'll get like some 7th-round gym defensive tackle at a Holy Cross or something like that. I want to quickly, just very briefly, give my thoughts on potential free agents that could still come. I don't believe DJ Ruido has signed with anyone today. That is the Bengals defensive tackle who is in his 30s. He did tear his ACL against the Vikings, so he would be unable to pass a physical, I believe, right now because of the knee injury. But he's someone that I could see the Vikings maybe going out and getting, who might have a year or two left. And if you are kind of going for that all-in 2025, not all-in, but that 2025 being the true, like, we should compete this year. Then Ruido is a guy who I think makes sense. I think he has enough tread on the tires that, okay, let's get him in here. He's a high-level D tackle. Maybe we can do something with him. Other than that, I want to say Aaron Jones. I would love to sign Aaron Jones. I think a Jones-Chandler backfield has a nice ring to it. I think Jones does a really good job at doing everything that running back should do. He runs well between the tackles. He can bounce outside with speed. He catches the ball really well. I mean, he pass protects well. He really is just a really good guy. But I think that there's a part of me that kind of wants to see what Ty Chandler can do as a one, because I think he showed a lot. He's so explosive. It's almost like he can't. It doesn't seem like he can break tackles because he's so small. He's so explosive through the hole, it's almost like he doesn't even get the chance to be tackled at the line. Like, he doesn't even have to push the pile because he's already through the hole by the time someone's ready to tackle him. So we'll see what happens there. Are you good if I give final thoughts?
Yeah, please do. One just really quick thing as a potential replacement for Madison / alternative for the Aaron Jones idea would be Aaron Jones' former teammate A.J. Dillon.
That's also true.
Also is a free agent from the Packers. His contract expired. He was not cut, but he's not going to be returning to the Packers. So, I think I saw somebody on the good old X today talk about him and Chandler as a potential Thunder and Lightning combination. Yeah. So that could be interesting as well.
Dylan is I'll quickly. I don't really have anything for my final thoughts. I'm going to be honest with you. Like anything pertinent. I mean, obviously, I'll babble for a couple minutes, but Dylan is someone who, as I obviously Vikings fans follow the Packers a little bit closer than they do other football teams, and so I know I've promoted this YouTube channel to you guys in the past, but Tom Grossi is a Packers fan who does general NFL content, and I think he's really good. I think he won Fan of the Year at the NFL Honors this year, which is super cool, and I love his channel, and he seems like an all-around really, really good dude. But he always would talk about how, like, for the size of A.J. Dillon, his inability to break tackles is, like, alarming. And so I don't know that I want A.J. Dillon. I'd rather have Aaron Jones.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like the question is, are the Giants going to be interested now that Saquon is an Eagle? What? DeAndre Swift is a Chicago Bear? What? There's been some crazy moves. Xavier McKinney's a Green Bay Packer. The free agency has been exciting so far, and it's only going to continue to be exciting. We are very close to like trades being announced for the draft, and I'm really hoping that we do get the alert that the Vikings have moved up. I've given you guys my Jaden Daniels speech 17 times now, so I won't give it to you an 18th time, but here's what I will say. We are still talking about the draft in upcoming weeks. The Vikings are in the running back department. You could say they're in the wide receiver department as well with, KJ Osborne leaving, and who knows, maybe Justin Jefferson's getting traded. So we'll talk about running backs and wide receivers at some point. And of course, we'll have our good friend Dustin on here soon from Vikes Now. He'll be coming on to discuss all these free agent signings and leavings and comings and goings. And we have a lot of good content in the pipeline for you guys. It's not quite. I know I've been out and I've been swinging the clubs. It's not quite golf and baseball season yet. We are still. Football is still hovering around, and there's a lot of exciting things. And like I said last year, probably a few too many times, this is when championships are won. This is when roster building begins, and you really start to get the pieces together that set the foundation for championship teams going forward. And so, who knows? I mean, Jonathan Grenard might have the game clinching sack in the Super Bowl in 3 years. And we'll look back to today as the day that we won the Super Bowl. And I'll say, I told you guys, I told you, today's the day that we won the Super Bowl. So thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you shop Unified. Follow the show at LTB Vikings. Follow this guy at Will Badlose and check out the Bad Loser blog. I haven't gotten into the NBA yet this season. I usually do by now, and it just hasn't drawn me in. But I am following the Timberwolves. I am very happy for you T-Wolves fans. Anthony Edwards is a dog, so congratulations on that. And follow the show at LTV Vikings and share it with your friends. Subscribe, smash the subscribe button, all that crap. Will, I'll let you take us home.
I'm just going to be brief here and give a shout out to our guy, Very Sad Vikings on X. He had a good tweet today, just sort of summarizing where we're at as a Minnesota Vikings franchise. Kirk Cousins is gone. Adam Thielen is gone. Dalvin Cook is gone. Eric Kendricks is gone. Danielle Hunter and Harrison Smith, potential/likely to be gone. The new era. And I think that sums it up very well. I think it's very clear that Kwesi and Kevin have put a stamp on this roster and they are reshaping it. And we will see. A lot is going to happen not only in the next couple of months, but then in the next couple of years, and see how this really first massive turnover the Vikings have had in many years. So it's exciting. It's nerve-wracking. It's disappointing, all wrapped up into one. It's part of the journey. We will be back next week, probably discussing some running backs and wide receivers for the upcoming draft. Until then, skol y'all.